This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. Welcome to the Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine podcast. I'm your host, co-founder, and editorial director of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, Jamie Bogner. And our managing editor, Joe Stange, is joining me on this special Best in Beer edition of the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Joe.
Thank you.
Joining me remotely from a basement in a farmhouse in rural Missouri. And we are having this, so we have just wrapped up this Best in Beer issue and are excited and incredibly excited to share the results with you. This is one of the most fun things that we do all year. Obviously, we build this Best in Beer issue using a combination of different strategies. We have a reader survey that we put out this past September and polled and had thousands and thousands of responses from readers as to their favorite breweries, beers, et cetera, where we've compiled all of that the hard way and have crunched all the numbers and have all of those lists to share with you all today. We also, a number of weeks ago, got together here in Colorado and went through a blind tasting of hundreds and hundreds of special submissions for our Best in Beer issue, as well as some of our favorites from past issues this previous year. And Joe and I have come up with our editor's picks for the top 20 beers of 2020, beers that sum up the best of the brewer's art and craft, as well as tell significant stories and our beers of significance in this just crazy year all around. So we're both excited to talk through these lists with you, and we're going to go kind of section by section. If you haven't subscribed yet to the magazine, do so now. Go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button. You should be able to immediately get access on apps, etc., to the digital edition of the magazine. It is, in fact, the only way that you can actually read that issue on the day that this podcast and the issue is released, Friday, October 23rd. It becomes, if you are a subscriber, that is the earliest way that you'll ever get to see the magazine. So by far, please support what we do. Go subscribe to the magazine at beerandbrewing.com. Click on the subscribe button. Download that issue. You can read along and you can hear some of our thoughts behind the scenes on why some of the picks are where they are and some of our play-by-play on what has been driving some changes in reader preferences and ups and downs this past year. Before we start, nearly 2,000 breweries across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico partner with G&D Chillers. Innovative modular designs and no proprietary parts propel G&D ahead as the premier choice for your glycol chilling needs. Breweries you recognize like Russian River, Ninkasi, Jack's Abbey, Samuel Adams, and a bunch more brewers you've heard on this very podcast all trust G&D to chill the beer you love. Call G&D Chillers to discuss your project today or reach out directly at gdchillers.com. Also, this episode is brought to you by Raw North Star Pils, a new base malt to set your compass by. Raw North Star Pils is crafted for brewers looking for a domestic Pilsner malt with low color and low modification. North Star Pils carries overtones of honey and sweetbread, supported by flavors and aromas of hay and a nutty character. Suitable for any beer style, but particularly craft brewed versions of classic lagers. Let Raw North Star Pils guide your craft by visiting bsgcraftbrewing.com or contact them at 1-800-374-2739. Quickly want to thank G&D and BSG, RAR, etc. For supporting a podcast this past year, and we're incredibly excited that they're coming back next year for full year sponsorships. In fact, I think the podcast is just about sold out for the year 2021, which is crazy and awesome. And thank you to our sponsors for helping us bring this to you every week. Joe, let's dive into it. What do you think we should start with first here as we talk through this special Best in Beer issue of Craft Beer and Brewing?
It's hard to pick. There's so many cool places to dive in here, but we could start with favorite breweries. Do that one.
Favorite breweries. I love this category. We try to break it down, because when you ask general questions, national breweries that distribute everywhere tend to get the most answers. This is a national and international poll, and people answer from everywhere. And so by breaking it down into breweries by size, we're also able to showcase some of those smaller breweries that are doing powerful stuff and really getting out there. So why don't you talk us through the small breweries, the top vote getters from 20 to 1 in the small brewery category, which we're defining as fewer than 15,000 barrels per year.
Right. So let's start at the bottom. Let's start at of the top 20, of course, not the bottom. Bottom of the top 20. Starting out of Los Angeles, Highland Park, first time on the list. We got Bottle Logic out of Anaheim, Great Notion in Portland, another newcomer, Suarez family in New York, Alvarado Street in Monterey, so another California brewery there, Anchorage, popping onto the list suddenly, Cantillon, another exciting newcomer at number 13, Vitamin C in Massachusetts. With the hazies.
And if you, in fact, we have a breakout brewer story in this very issue on vitamin C, along with a hazy double IPA recipe for folks that want to brew along at home for them.
A couple more exciting newcomers at number 12 and 11 are The Veil out of Richmond, Virginia, and Dovetail out of Chicago. And we're going to be talking more about both of them later, too. We got Tired Hands at number 10 in Pennsylvania. Popping in at number 9 on this list is Monkish in Torrance, California. Number 8, Hop Butcher for the World in Chicago. Number 7, Side Project here in St. Louis, Missouri. And number 6, this is, of all the newcomers just popping into the list, this one pops in at number 6. And I've got theories about why, but we got Bierstadt Lagerhaus in Denver. Top 5, here we go. Burial, Asheville, North Carolina. Jester King in Austin, Texas. Number 3, Weldworks in Greeley, Colorado. Brooklyn's Other Half Brewery, number 2. And at number 1, Vermont's Hill Farmstead Brewery.
I think this might be the last year that Other Half will be on this small breweries list. They were at 14,500 barrels this year. And with this expansion in DC and another brewery coming in Brooklyn, they will certainly be larger than that next year. It's some big moves. And congratulations to Hill Farmstead yet again. I think they've pretty much had this category locked since we started, and are continuing to just dominate and put out incredibly well thought out beer that our readers clearly love. Mid-sized breweries, and we define these as 15,000 to 100,000 barrels of beer per year. In the number 20 spot, we've got Fort George from Astoria, Oregon. And number 19, Creature Comforts. Number 18, Lost Abbey Port Brewing out of San Marcos. Number 17, Lawson's Finest out of Warren, Vermont. Number 16, Prairie Artisan Ales out of Oklahoma. Number 15, Fatheads from Ohio. At number 14, Jack's Abbey enters the list from Framingham, Massachusetts. Number 13, Surly out of Minneapolis. Number 12, Freem out of Hood River in Oregon. Number 11, Half Acre from Chicago. Number 10, also from Chicago, Revolution. Number 9, Fremont Brewing out of Seattle. Number 8, The Alchemist out of Stowe, Vermont. Number 7, Three Floyds out of Munster, Indiana. Number 6, Trillium, also out of Boston. Number 5, Modern Times out of San Diego. Number 4, Toppling Goliath from Decorah, Iowa. Number 3, Stalwarts in Craft Beer, Allagash Brewing out of Portland, Maine. Number 2, Treehouse out of Charlton, Massachusetts. And at the number 1 spot, Russian River Brewing out of Santa Rosa, California.
On to large breweries then. 100,000 to 500,000 barrels of size per year. Coming to number 20, Sweetwater out of Georgia. Number 19, Brooklyn Brewery. Number 18, Weihenstephaner from Germany. Number 17, Harpoon out of Boston. 16, Southern Tier up in New York State. 15, Brewdog, based in Ohio, we say, based in Scotland as well. Number 14, Rogue in Newport, Oregon. 13, Victory Brewing in Pennsylvania. Number 12, Ballast Point, San Diego. Number 11,
they actually moved down a category this year because of that ownership change that they had, and so that's an interesting one.
Well, they're getting craftier, smaller.
Yeah, I guess they are.
Number 11, Boulevard Brewing out of Kansas City, Missouri. Number 10, Oscar Blues, Longmont, Colorado. Number 9, New Glarus in Wisconsin. It's still not available anywhere besides Wisconsin. Number 8, Great Lakes Brewing out of Cleveland, Ohio. Number 7, Odell in Fort Collins. Number 6, Trogs in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Top 5 of the large breweries. We got Cigar City in Tampa. Number 4, Deschutes in Bend, Oregon. Number 3, Firestone Walker, Paso Robles, California. Number 2 is Stone in Escondido. And the top large brewery, according to you, our readers, is number 1, Bell's Brewing in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Congratulations, Bell's. Once again. Now we move on to very large breweries, and these are breweries that brew more than 500,000 barrels a year. And for breweries that are owned by conglomerate groups that own more breweries and have a collective volume of higher than that, we have put them in this category, even though some of these sub-brands may not brew 500,000 barrels themselves. For that reason, we start off at number 10 with Wicked Weed from Asheville, North Carolina. Number 9, Guinness Diageo. And number 8, also Goose Island, owned by ABI. Number 7, Youngling out of Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Number 6, Samuel Adams, Boston, Massachusetts. At number 5, Dogfish Head from Milton, Delaware. All of those brands both owned by Boston Beer Company. Number 4, we have Lagunitas, owned by Heineken out of Petaluma, California. Number 3, we have New Belgium Brewing out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Number 2, Founders out of Grand Rapids. And number 1, once again this year, Sierra Nevada from Chico, California. Let's move on to who brews it best. And this is a category where we ask you all, the readers, to tell us who brews it best style by style. And this is our attempt to kind of drill down and find things beyond just the most singular popular breweries to find, say, who brews your favorite West Coast IPA, hazy IPA, Saison, Abbey style beer, sour, stouter porter, pale ale, or lager. And so let's walk through some of those lists. Joe, why don't you talk us through number 20 to number 1 of favorite American IPA brewers?
All right, here we go. American IPAs. At number 20, your favorite American IPA brewer is The Alchemist. Number 19, Modern Times. 18 is Green Flash. 17, Cigar City. 16, Ballast Point. 15, Maine Beer. 14, Founders. 13, New Realm, popping onto the list for the first time. Number 12, Highland Park. 11, Fatheads out of Ohio. Number 10, Breakside, also just appearing on the list at number 10. Number 9, Odell. Number 8, Firestone Walker. Number 7, Treehouse. Number 6, Lagunitas. And number 5, Dogfish Head. Number 4, Bell's. And for the top 3, here we go. Number 3, Sierra Nevada. Number 2, Stone. And your reader's choice favorite American IPA brewer is Russian River.
Congratulations to Russian River. I'm drinking a Pliny for President right now. Let's talk about favorite hazy IPA brewers as you voted for them. In the number 20 spot, we have Burial. And number 19, Toppling Goliath. Number 18, Pint House out of Austin, Texas. Number 17, Parish Brewing out of Louisiana. Number 16, Deschutes. Number 15, Tired Hands. Number 14 is Bell's. Number 13, Vitamin C. Number 12, Modern Times. Number 11 is New Belgium. Number 10, Old Nation out of Michigan. Number 9, Hill Farmstead. Number 8, Hop Butcher for the World. Number 7, Monkish out of Torrance, California. Number 6, Trillium. Number 5, Weldworks Brewing. Number 4, Other Half. Number 3, the makers of Heady Topper, aka The Alchemist. Number 2, the brand that's brought you hazy little thing, Sierra Nevada. And in the number 1 spot, not a surprise to most people, Treehouse Brewing out of Charlton, Massachusetts. Joe, why don't you take us through favorite Saison brewers?
Oh, I'm glad this one's mine, Jamie, because I'm drinking number 1 right now. But let's start with number 20. Favorite Saison brewer, reader's choice. Number 20, Off Color. 19, Casey. 18, Oxbow. 17, Trillium. 16 is Fantôme. 15, New Belgium. 14, Blackberry Farm. 13, Highland Park. 12, Fair Isle out of Washington. Number 11, Tired Hands. Number 10, Holy Mountain. Climbing on that list. Last year was 19. Number 9, Side Project. Number 8, Funkworks. Number 7, Sante Adarius. Number 6, Omagong. And for the top 5 Saison brewers, according to you, number 5, Jester King. Number 4, Allagash. Number 3 is Boulevard. Number 2, Hill Farmstead. And the number 1 favorite Saison brewer, according to our readers, would be Brasserie Dupont in Wallonia in Belgium. And I'm drinking a Saison Dupont right now, just for you guys.
Joe, why don't you also take us through favorite Abbey-style brewers?
All right, I'll do it, and I'll do my best at the pronunciation. Here we go. Number 20, Monkish. Number 19, Lef. Number 18, La Trappe. Number 17, Sierra Nevada. 16 is Delirium. 15, Spencer. 14 is Boulevard. Number 13 is Bostales. Number 12 is Orval. And is Orval really an Abbey-style brewer? That's an interesting question. Technically, I guess it has to be, right? Number 11, Duvel. Yeah, well, there you go. Duvel. Number 11. Is that an Abbey-style brewer? I guess if you count who they own, sure. Number 10, Unibrew. Number 9, Rochefort. Number 8, The Lost Abbey. Number 7, West-Vleteren. Number 6, New Belgium. Number 5, Westmalle. Number 4, Chimay. Number 3, St. Bernardus. Number 2, Allagash out of Maine. And your number 1 Reader's Choice favorite Abbey-style brewer is Omagong out of Cooperstown, New York.
Congratulations to them. Let's move on to favorite sour or wild ale brewer. And before anyone argues about whether breweries should be in this category, let's just say that we cast a broad net and try to trust you all, the readers, to vote for who you want to put in these categories. Number 20, Hudson Valley. Number 19, Black Project. Number 18, Hill Farmstead. Number 17, Side Project. Number 16, Allagash. Number 15, Dreifonteinen. Number 14, Trillium. Number 13, Brewery Tarot. Number 12, Rogue. Number 11, The Rare Barrel. And number 10, DeGard out of Tillamook, Oregon. Number 9, Classics in the Realm, Jolly Pumpkin. Number 8, KC Brewing and Blending and Brewing. Number 7, Wicked Weed. Number 6, New Belgium. Number 5 is Cascade. Number 4, Crooked Stave. Number 3, Russian River. Number 2 was last year's number 1, Jester King Brewery. And in the number 1 spot, out of Brussels, Belgium, Cantillon. Why don't you take us through favorite lagers, Joe?
Favorite lagers. Here we go. Your
favorite lager brewers.
Favorite lager brewers, yeah. Here we go. Number 20, Urban Chestnut out of St. Louis. Number 19, Live Oak. Number 18, Founders. 17 is Bells. 16, Great Lakes. Number 15 is Victory Brewing. Number 14, Highland Park on another list. Number 13, Weinstefaner out of Bavaria. Number 12, Portland, Oregon's Wayfinder. Number 11, Chuckanut out of Washington State. Number 10, Eyinger, another Bavarian brewery on your favorite lager brewer list. Number 9, Freem out of Hood River, Oregon. Number 8, Pilsner Urquell. Number 7, Firestone Walker. Number 6, Dovetail out of Chicago. Number 5, Suarez Family. Number 4, Yangling. Number 3, Samuel Adams, Boston Beer Company. Number 2, Bierstadt Lagerhaus. And your number 1 Reader's Choice favorite lager brewer is Jack's Abbey. Congratulations to all of your favorite lager brewers.
And I think we'll probably hear a little more from Jack's Abbey later on, as well as some of the others. Let's talk about favorite pale ale brewer. Number 20, Boulevard. Number 19, Odell. Number 18, Fremont. Number 17 is Founders. Number 16 is Stone. Number 15, Firestone Walker. Number 14, Georgetown out of Washington State. Number 13 is Cellar Maker. Number 12, Deschutes. Number 11, Maine Beer Company. And number 10, Lagunitas. Number 9 is Treehouse. Number 8, Half Acre. Number 7 is Trillium. Number 6 is Bells. Number 5 is Toppling Goliath. Number 4, Hill Farmstead. Number 3, 3 Floyds. Number 2, on the strength of Dale's Pale Ale, it's Oscar Blues, and at the number 1 spot. And I should mention that in this category, it's almost not fair for anyone else other than this brewery, Sierra Nevada. Sierra Nevada took that number 1 spot in the Pale Ale category with 4 times as many votes as the number 2. I mean, it was that far. They were just that far ahead. And it's not taking anything away from anyone else. It is just speaks to how passionate all of you all are as readers about your favorite pale ale brewer, and that's Sierra Nevada. So finish us out with favorite stouts and porter brewers, Joe.
You got it. Number 20, Angry Chair. Number 19, Perennial out of St. Louis. Number 18, Modern Times. Number 17, Sierra Nevada. Number 16, Samuel Smith. Number 15, Firestone Walker. Number 14, Ale Smith. Number 13, Weldworks. Number 12, Deschutes out of Bend, Oregon. Number 11, Treehouse. Number 10, Bottle Logic. Number 9, Trillium. Number 8, Side Project out of St. Louis, just appearing on the list. Number 7, Fremont. Number 6, North Coast. And top 5 favorite stout and porter brewers, we've got Goose Island at number 5. Number 4, Left Hand. Number 3 is Bell's, appearing on multiple of these lists. Number 2, Founders, also appearing on multiple lists. And your number 1 favorite Reader's Choice stout or porter brewer is Guinness.
Well done. Thank you for all of you all who have voted on those categories and shared those interesting results with us. We're going to move on to the category of favorite beer cities next, but before we do that, 5 Star Chemical and Supply is your leading provider of cleaning, sanitizing, and adjunct chemicals for breweries throughout North America and internationally. All products have been formulated with safety, equipment, material, and quality in mind. Are you interested in trying their products? Contact support at 5starchemicals.com to inquire about a free craft brew sample pack and only pay the shipping. Just mention that you heard it here on the podcast. Cheers to beer. Also, Grandstand is your source for the latest trends in custom printed drinkware, apparel, and promotional items. They make your job easy by serving as your one-stop shop for everything. Visit egrandstand.com/lookbook to see what's trending. Let's dive into favorite beer cities. This one, I guess when you look at our Reader's Choice lists in every issue, every Best in Beer issue, they are basically a popularity contest. I mean, that is kind of the gist of what they are. And so some of this, I think, aligns with where people are and where our readers are and where those are that are following what we do. And the number, so let's count down from 20 to number 1 of favorite beer cities. In the number 20 spot, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Florida. The number 19 spot, staying in number 19 year over year, is Bend, Oregon. Number 18, Atlanta, Georgia. Number 17, St. Louis, Missouri. Woo. Milwaukee, Wisconsin's popping in at 16. That's an unexpected one. Number 15, Richmond, Virginia. I don't want to take anything away from Milwaukee, but that's an interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool
Richmond,
cool
Virginia.
Traditional beer city.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool to see them pop on the list like that. Not a huge city, kind of like St. Louis, kind of punching above its weight.
Right. Richmond, Virginia, number 15. Number 14, Burlington, Vermont. Number 13, Philadelphia, a classic beer town. Number 12, Boston, Massachusetts. Number 11, New York, moving up in the list. Number 10, Los Angeles, California, entering the list at number 10. Someone must have done some vote stumping out there in LA this year, because we've seen a number of breweries from the LA area showing up on these lists and at the levels that they didn't last year. So, hey, thanks for showing up, LA. Seattle at number 9, Fort Collins and Greeley, Colorado at number 8, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Michigan at number 7, Portland, Maine at number 6, Chicago, Illinois is number 5, Portland, Oregon is number 4, and the top 3 remain unchanged year over year. Number 3, Asheville, North Carolina, at number 2, San Diego, California, and at number 1, Denver, Boulder, Colorado, where we would be for the Great American Beer Festival last weekend. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we are remotely having to do these kinds of things. Hope everyone tuned in for that, bought their ticket, and supported the Brewers Association through this difficult year. that they're having. Let's talk about beer bars, Joe. Why don't you count us down for number 20?
I'll do it. And I find both these lists to be really bittersweet right now, but I think next year is going to be a great year. I know we'd all love to be traveling more right now. Best beer bars around the world, according to our readers. Number 20, the Porter Beer Bar in Atlanta, Georgia. Number 19, Beer on the Wall in Park Ridge, Illinois. Number 18, the Avenue Pub in New Orleans. Number 17, Beer Karma in Brooklyn, New York. Number 16, old classic institution here, Max's Tap House in Baltimore, Maryland. Number 15, the Glendale Tap in Glendale, California. Number 14, the Browers Cafe in Seattle, Washington. Number 13, Hop Leaf in Chicago. Number 12, the excellently named El Bait Shop in Des Moines, Iowa. Number 11, Tap and Handle in Fort Collins. Number 10, the Ormsby Abbey in Worcester, Massachusetts. Number 9, Flying Saucer in various locations. Number 8, the Brickstore Pub in Atlanta. Number 7, here's one I don't know how to say. Is it Novare Res in Portland, Maine?
Novare Res.
Okay, close enough. Number 6, Yard House, various locations. Number 5, Tornado, various locations. Number 4, Hop Cat, also various locations. Number 3, Monk's Cafe in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Number 2, the Church Key Beer Bar in Washington, D.C. And again, your number 1 best beer bar around the world, Falling Rock Tap House in Denver, Colorado. I was there recently. They're hanging in there, and I hope a lot of these other places, hope they're all still here when we get through this thing next year.
Absolutely. And for all of you that are listening to this, if you have a chance to go get some takeout or do something to help support your local beer bars, they do not have some of the benefits that breweries have and the ability to package and have alternate revenue sources. And a lot of them are in dire shape, and they need your support to remain in business and to continue pouring great beer for all of us in the future. So if you can, and if you have a chance to support beer bars, find a way. They need our help so that they can survive and continue making our beer world as diverse and interesting as it is. Let's pivot now and talk about our Reader's Choice Top 50 Beers of 2020. Let's start at number 50 with Old Nation M43 IPA. Was on the list at 46 last year and is still there on the list now. Number 49, Bierstadt Lagerhaus Slow Pour Pills entering the list. For a small brewery that doesn't distribute, that's a big call right there. Number 48, Left Hand. Yeah. They're making inroads, and I'll tell you, lagers are everywhere on the list this year at a level and an intensity that we have not seen before. So it's real, people. Number 48, Left Hand Nitro Milk Stout. Number 47, Fremont Lush. Number 46, Fathead's Headhunter. Number 45, Dogfish Head 90 Minute. Number 44, Bell's Hop Slam. Number 43, Sierra Nevada Celebration. Number 42, Russian River Blind Pig. Number 41 is Great Lakes Edmund Fitzgerald Porter.
Love that one. Such a classic. Well, I'll do the next 10. We got number 40, Deschutes with Fresh Squeezed IPA. Number 39, Half Acre Daisy Cutter, appearing on the list. Number 38, Firestone Walker Union Jack IPA, climbing up the list 10 spots. Number 37, Deschutes Black Butte Porter, another great classic. 36, Samuel Adams Oktoberfest. So we have a seasonal appearing on the list.
I mean,
also,
it's no Jacko Pumpkin. It's no Jacko Pumpkin, but I mean, that's
right.
An all right beer.
Yep. There you go. We'll just leave that reference there. 35, North Coast Old Rasputin Stout. 34, The Alchemist Focal Banger. Number 33, Weinstefan Hefeweiss beer, climbing up the list. Number 32, Boulevard Tank 7. And number 31, Lawson's Finest Sip of Sunshine IPA.
At 30, Youngling Traditional Lager. At 29, Brasserie d'Orval's Orval. Number 28, Founders Canadian Breakfast Stout. Number 27, Stone IPA. Number 26, Oscar Blues Dale's Pale Ale, kind of fitting that trend we saw this year of some classics in craft regaining new strength. 25, Toppling Goliath King Sue. 24, Fat Tire Amber Ale from New Belgium, speaking to the exact same thing I was just talking about. Dogfish Head 60-minute IPA is in 23. At 22, Treehouse Julius, and 21 is Sierra Nevada Torpedo IPA.
And that one climbed 22 spots, and I think that's cool. People were sort of going for the hazy little thing and all this, but the Torpedo is hanging in there. It's not just hanging in there; it's been selling like crazy this year.
Well, yeah, hazy IPA it took a little bit of a dive. We'll get to that in a second here.
Yeah.
But why don't you talk them through 20 to 11 here?
Yeah, one of my favorite beers ever. Firestone Walker Pivo Pils at number 20. That climbed 11 spots. Number 19, Three Floyds Zombie Dust Pale Ale. Number 18, Weldworks Juicy Bits IPA. Number 17, Heady Topper IPA from The Alchemist. Number 16, New Belgium Voodoo Ranger. Another
moving
big
all the
climber.
way up from number 40 to number 16 in 1 year. Yeah.
Number 15, Toppling Goliath Pseudo Sue. Number 14, Samuel Adams Boston Lager, hanging in there among the aficionados. Number 13, Goose Island Bourbon County Brand Stout. Number 12, Pilsner Urquell climbed from 41 up to 12. And if that's not a sign of people taking lager a little more seriously than this year, I don't know what is. And number 11, Founders Kentucky Breakfast Stout.
Number 10 is also Founders with Breakfast Stout. And number 9, Sierra Nevada Hazy Little Thing, dipping down a little bit on the list, but still top 10. Number 8, Cigar City High Life IPA. And number 7, Founders All Day IPA. Number 6, the beer that Joe is drinking right now, Brasserie DuPont's Saison DuPont.
It's almost empty.
Which was also number 6 last year, so they are holding strong there. Number 5, Allagash White, a absolute classic and widely respected. I mean, I guess all of these beers, at least in the top 20, 30 or so, maybe even the entire 50 could claim that. Number 4, Guinness Extra Stout. And number 3, also a number 3 last year, Pliny the Elder Imperial IPA. At number 2 was last year's number 1, and it has now dropped a spot. That is Bell's Brewery Two Hearted IPA. And in the number 1 spot this year, it was number 2 last year, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Am I crazy, or do the 1 and 2 just keep taking turns switching?
1, 2, and it's really 1 and 2, and then it's like Russian River and Pliny the Elder is just always just right behind them, right there. It's there's some pretty good consistency. And I think it was only something like 10 or 15 votes that ended up separating the number 1 and number 2. And so It's still a tight race. I mean, when we're talking about thousands and thousands of votes, it becomes a pretty, tight race for that kind of thing. Yeah. So, okay, Joe, I think it's now time to talk about our editor's picks for our top beers of 2020. Before we do that, ABS Commercial is excited to be a part of today's podcast. ABS is a full brewery outfitter offering brew houses, tanks, keg washers, and small parts. ABS wanted to do something fun for the craft beer industry, so they're giving away an ABS Keg Viking keg washer live on December 5th, which happens to be National Repeal Day. To enter, go to www.abs-commercial.com, click on Keg Viking page, and fill out the contest form for your chance to win. Also, the quickest way to see every new issue of Craft Beer Brewing Magazine is by subscribing, since subscribers get immediate access to digital editions of the magazine via PDF and our mobile apps. If you want to read this entire Best in Beer issue now, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on the subscribe button, and join. So let's do it, Joe. No time like the present. Let's dive into the big show, our best 20 beers in 2020. And let's start that off. Why don't you start off with a brewery that focuses on lagers out of Chicago, Illinois?
Yeah, well, we got Dovetail Helles right here in our top 20. And this is pretty exciting for us, I think. I mean, we had Dovetail as a breakout brewer. Actually, it was our Best in Beer 2019 issue a year ago. And first of all, they're among our critics picks, which we're going to get into our critics picks in the next podcast episode. But 3 different critics of ours picked out Dovetail beers. We already knew we liked them. And then when we get to blind tasting for this issue, to have them rise to the top with a couple of different beers, and it was actually hard to choose. I'm not even sure this one is my favorite one of theirs, because I really love that Rauch beer. I really love that Czech dark lager they did this year. Their Kolsch is perfect, basically. What I love about these guys, besides the fact that the beers are great, they're really stubborn about traditional methods. So they've got a cool ship actually for cooling, not for making sour beers only, but for cooling the lager as part of their process. They're doing decoctions, they're doing spunding, they're doing all that stuff to make the process as traditional as possible. The beers all have a kind of a Franconian character to them. To me, there's a little bit of minerality to them. The malts come from there too, and this Helles, although it's not like, when I look at objectively, I love the beer, but it's one that has just grown on me the more that I've drank it, and when it just really shined in our tastings. So I think it's a great pick here. Dovetail out of Chicago, congratulations! This is a wonderful beer.
For our next pick, we're going to go in a completely opposite direction, and that is Toppling Goliath Assassin Barrel-Aged Imperial Stout. Why not jump right from Helles to what could be the exact polar opposite of that on the beer spectrum, and that is the darkest, richest, most intense barrel-aged stout, one that our judges rated a perfect 100 this past year. And as Joe and I were talking through this, I think we had 5 beers this year throughout the course of Craft Beer Brewing that were rated 100s by our blind panel of reviewers. And so for us, that carries an immense weight, and all 5 of those beers are here in our our best beers of 2020. With Toppling Goliath Assassin, this is a beer that I think I've had every other year since at least 2013, and we've watched an arc kind of take place in the early days of this beer. It was revolutionary. It was, something different and singular in its own kind of approach to beer. And I think Toppling Goliath and Perennial and a few others had just carved out a different identity for what these kinds of beers could even be. I think the entire category was defined by Bourbon County Stout. I mean, obviously being the kind of originator of barrel-aged imperial stout. Bourbon County has had the luxury of defining it for so many years, but they came out with these thicker, bigger body, a little more chocolate forward, richer, deeper base notes kinds of beers, and they just changed. They created a different flavor approach to brewing imperial stout. And then what was initially novel and different quickly became something that others in the market, other producers adopted. And then over that time, we also watched something like Toppling Goliath, even though the fermentation profile shifted a little bit, it became a little bit more estery. It, wasn't quite as, I don't want to call it crisp, but it just wasn't as tightly defined, and it had there was a little more dark fruit character in there. And so we watched, from a kind of public persona and perspective, watched some folks, how to say this nicely. I think that some of the trader crowd and the geekier elements of the beer world looked at Assassin and didn't give it the credence that it once held, unfortunately, just because of that. And I think that this 2020 edition of Assassin is a dramatic shift back to the Assassin of old, that kind of well-defined, well-structured, well-sculpted, tightly layered, dark, rich, deep, dark chocolate notes with beautiful middle layers of caramel and toffee notes that kind of hide amongst that deep roast there. A much lower kind of ester profile, not much dark fruit in that fermentation character to talk about. And, the result is just a little bit punchier. And I think that that's the reason that it primarily stood out with our judges this year, and why they found it so interesting and so compelling. And so it's awesome and fun to watch a beer like Assassin that has been a part of this story for the past decade of barrel-aged imperial stout, and watch Sabo and crew kind of reassert their influence and show the world of brewing just what they're capable of in this beer. Let's flip back in the other direction again, Joe, and why don't we talk about Springdale Kolsch money?
Yeah, well, so Springdale, your Reader's Choice favorite lager brewer is Jack's Abbey, and Springdale is the everything but lager side of Jack's Abbey Brewing. So it's not really a huge surprise that they would make a totally precise, beautiful, basically perfect Kolsch. We could have, and we considered putting, for example, Jack's Abbey Post-Shift Pilsner or in the spot, or their Copper Legend Oktoberfest beer, which did really well with our blind judging panel. But in the end, we had to go with this one. It's just, it's perfect. It's a perfect beer. It's got just a little bit like a whisper of pear drop ester over it that tells you it's a Kolsch. It is perfectly attenuated. I don't like the word crisp. I think it gets overused, but here it's the word. It fits. It's a little bit, I'd say like a little more bitter than the classic Kolsch profile, and I like that. Just a touch more, not a lot. And this is exciting too. We have a recipe for it in this issue, which I think is really cool. We went out and found a couple recipes for some of our best in beer picks. This is one. So if you want to brew a great Kolsch at home, we've got a homebrew recipe here, and this would be a great starting point to work with.
Subscribe or pick up this new issue of Craft Beer Brewing's Best in Beer right now and brew it yourself at home. Thanks to Jack Hendler and the Jack's Abbey and Springdale crew for sharing that with our readers. Next up in our top 20 beers of 2020 was the only Saison to score 100 with our blind panel, and that is Yazoo Brett Saison, Yazoo Brewing out of Nashville, Tennessee. This one was just absolutely spectacular. It had that kind of borderline goose-like mineral funk, which in some ways is heftier than what we generally expect out of a beer called Saison. And for American brewers, American brewers tend to push these lines all of the time. What we consider mixed fermentation Saisons with their amount of kind of fruit character and these kinds of intense woody expressions, they're certainly not traditional in it by any stretch. These are American iterations building on historical building blocks, but creating something new and different. And I think that this kind of iteration of quote unquote Saison is the same kind of thing. It may not be historically rooted in what Saison used to be, but then again, all styles as we know them are living and breathing things, and they move at the whims of brewers themselves, and it becomes creative iterations of these things that help us define what they become in the future. And I think that Yazoo Brett Saison is just one of those beers that will help continue to define what a Brett Saison can be and should be, and what our expectations are for that light goose-like mineral funk, but also a nice kind of soft and bready malt character to it. Orange marmalade, lime, yuzu, kiwi, fried plantain. There are lots of these, fun fruit notes, but with layers of, very light caramel and breadiness in the mix there, so that it doesn't just become all fruit. That sip is super dry, and that bitterness becomes a bit pithy, which adds that additional layer to it. And then there's just those zesty phenols that tend to dry it all out again and make it and give it that kind of clean finish off your palate. Just an absolutely beautiful beer that's tightly edited. And Brandon Jones and the Embrace the Funk side of Yazoo are doing some fantastic work, and it's fun to be able to celebrate this beer from them. Next up on the list is out of Hood River, Oregon, Freem and their Czech Dark Lager. This one was another 100 rated beer from our blind tasting panel this year. And it was only a matter of time before Freem hit with one of these, because, as I looked back through Freem's record of scores in craft beer and brewing, it's quite incredible just how consistently high they score as a brewery. Obviously, on this podcast, I've talked to Josh Freem in the past. Incredibly thoughtful brewers that are very intentional, purposeful, and are highly focused on their lager beers. This Czech Dark Lager was just absolutely phenomenal. I love that this year and in the past 18 months have seen more and more breweries diving into the lager canon and moving past just Pilsner and Helles or Schwarzbier and stretching out into other lager styles and looking at what's kind of possible in this lager realm. And Czech Dark Lager has become one of those categories that has really, really, taken off this year. This specific Czech style Tmave was just clean, concise, timeless, had these light toffee, pumpernickel spice, burnt bread crust notes, but also this just really pleasant, noble hops kind of structure to it and light floralness that kind of pulled it all together. None of the pieces competed with each other. Everything was just perfectly complementary. But it was just a technical achievement. Every single piece of it, from the lingering lace of the head as you moved through the glass, just shows the kind of approach to technical brewing that Freem focuses on. And to match that kind of technical acumen with the kind of flavorful, thoughtful approach to building that, just set this beer apart. And so it was clearly 100 for our judges and a no-brainer to include right here on this list. Joe, why don't you talk to us about the next beer, Hop Butcher for the World, Run to Daylight?
Yeah, this is a fun beer. I mean, I think this the whole hazy, juicy trend with these 16-ounce cans, colorful artwork. If you don't know better, it does looks like a lot of style over substance, and often it is. Let's be honest. With these guys, it's the real deal. I was a skeptic. I'm no longer a skeptic about this. I think we've talked a lot about, Jamie and I privately have talked about how we think sometimes the double, triple, imperial scale of these hazy, juicy IPAs makes more sense to us. The beer gets rounder, it gets more balanced, and a lot of these beers are frankly too sweet to drink much of anyway, so might as well just crank up the ABV and make it a nightcap, right? And for me, this Run to Daylight, it was one of my favorite beers of the year. It is a very orange juicy screwdriver like triple IPA. It's a sugary cocktail of a beer, and it's just so well integrated. You've got the Citra, Galaxy, Simcoe, and Strata hops all working together. I get like torn lime wedges in the nose, some pineapple daiquiri along with that fresh squeezed orange juice. The sweetness is there, it's present, it's evident, but it doesn't cloy, not quite. And it's just, these beers are just fun. And I think with these guys, they make, by the way, some really nice hop forward lagers too. They just work beautifully with hops. These guys are like hop wizards.
It's almost like it's in the name of the brewery or something.
And when yeah, well, there you go, yeah. And when I taste their bigger stuff, the double, triple stuff, I just want them to. I want to see how far they can push it. It's like, if this is what you're doing on the higher end, just cut it loose. What else can you do? Anyway, these guys are always fun to follow, and this was a great beer. Great, I scored 100 with our panel, right?
It did.
Yeah.
And one of our judges described this beer. Now, and the judge in particular, I won't name him just to, allow him his anonymity, but is a professional brewer for a brewery in Colorado here, for one that people know of. And well-trained, thoroughly trained on sensory, everything else. In the notes that he wrote about this beer in, privately on our judging form, because we use a digital form that our judges fill out. I remember specifically he said, "This may be the best IPA I've ever tasted." And that's just incredible praise coming from, folks that drink as much and as many different beers as our judges do. This one was just a spectacularly cohesive, compelling example of this triple IPA. I know I say it all the time, but I love to claim that I don't love triple IPAs, and then I drink triple A's and remind myself of just how much I love the intensity that this captures all of that hopsness that I just absolutely love. And so I have to stop saying that I don't love triple IPAs, because clearly, especially in this kind of hazy, juicy realm, they have become my favorite iterations of this entire style. But yeah, congratulations to Hop Butcher. This is a well-earned, well-deserved credit, and credit to them as brewers for pulling that off.
Absolutely.
Next up on our list, we're going way back down in ABV, down into that 5% realm, 5.5%, with Firestone Walker's Nitro Merlin Milk Stout. And as our panelists and our working through our stout issue, last issue, we're working through these beers. Nitro Merlin Milk Stout rated, I think, a 98 with the panel. But as I was writing my editor's review of that beer, I was thinking about something that Stephen Kirby from Hogshead, kept saying while we were doing the podcast while I was doing the podcast with him, and that was, that every beer should tell a story, and you can see the story of that beer at the lacing on the glass as you finish it. And as I poured this can of Nitro Merlin Milk Stout out, the first and most spectacular impression that it made was this thick, incredible foam and head, nice chocolatey dark head that just lingered and lingered and lingered. And I mean, it took 5 minutes for that head to die down to a point where I was really ready to take a sip. And it stuck around for at least 20 or 30 minutes with a pretty significant amount of head still left over. As I took each sip from that glass, a new mark appeared on it, and a new mark appeared on it. And so looking at it from a kind of technical brewing perspective and a focus of the brewers on creating a beer that technically is brewed with malt in a way to produce that kind of foam retention and head retention, and to kind of tell that story over and over, and then being able to package that beer in 12-ounce cans that are then sold across the country, and beer, that are then, when they're poured, give you that same kind of experience. It's a special achievement, and we can certainly chalk that up to the brewers at Firestone Walker, because they are amazing technical brewers. Now, if it were just a feat of technical brewing, it certainly wouldn't be on this list, because there are plenty of breweries that have mastered that kind of technical approach. But the flavor of this beer complemented that kind of insanely tight technical approach, with all of these nice little touches, chai spice, light roasted coffee, caramel apple, a little touch of marshmallow, again, all in very subtle notes, in very minor ways, nothing heavy handed, nothing over the top, nothing, when we say these flavors, people start to think, oh, I didn't get caramel apple out of that. I'm like, well, we're talking about very subtle impacts of these very tightly placed, small flavor notes that add complexity in a very simple beer. And this one just pulled it off in a way that I just haven't tasted. I mean, part of it was dealing with COVID and everything else, but being able to sit here in my basement, drinking that beer, thinking about it, contemplating it, but enjoying it and watching it tell me a story. As I was going through it, I understood completely what our judges thought when they rated it the best of the small stouts in our stout issue this year.
We taste a lot of big, thick imperial stouts with, apple pies and stuff in them, and lots of lactose. And I think it would be a mistake to say that this beer is light and restrained, because it's really indulgent. I mean, it does have a richness to it, and it tastes like chocolate and marshmallows and cocoa and chocolate milk, and it's so like, it's an easy beer to like. You could put it in front of just about anybody and they would get it. And it's just it's a crowd pleaser type beer. It looks good, it tastes delicious. It's a great beer.
And at 5.5%, you can drink more than one and enjoy it. And that's quite an accomplishment. So kudos to Firestone Walker for this one here on our list. Next up on our list, Joe, why don't you take this next one?
So we got Grains of Wrath, Crypt Keeper. These guys, this is out of Camas, Washington, which is Washington State, but it's really Portland, Oregon area. It's not as far from central Portland as it looks on a map, let's say. These guys came onto our radar because of their Vienna Lager, which had won GABF 2018. It won a bronze, and then last year it won a silver. So when we wrote about Vienna lagers earlier this year, we thought, okay, we better get some of that and taste it. It was great, of course. But they also threw some IPAs in the box, and then they started submitting beers also for our blind tasting panel, and they just killed it. And this was one of the highest scoring of the year, this Grains of Wrath Crypt Keeper. And one thing I love is that they are like sticking with the West Coast style. It's bright, clear, it's beautiful, it's bitter, but it's juicy. So I think this is where one of the directions IPAs are going to go. Take all the juicy lessons out of the hazy trend, but make it bright and crisp and bitter, and return to some of that. And I'm excited about that. And these guys know what they're doing. Mike Hunsaker, the head brewer, he honed his skills at Fatheads, and then kind of developed his own style that he gets to do now at Grains of Wrath. This beer is so fun. One of my beers of the year, and it's in my critics picks, is Dystopia, another IPA from them. I'm excited to see where West Coast IPA is going to go in the next couple of years. People are wanting it again, and if you're looking for it, you can do a lot worse than try to find some stuff from Grains of Wrath. Congratulations to Mike and Owen at Grains of Wrath. This is a wonderful beer.
Next up on our list, American Solera, Cool Ship Road Trip. Tulsa, Oklahoma's American Solera, really blew the socks off of our review panel with Cool Ship Road Trip this year. And this is another one that was just an incredible high score. What an interesting project, too, in order to create it, because this is a collaboration beer between American Solera and Jester King, where each year they brew wort at the respective breweries. Basically, they'll brew a Jester King, drive to Oklahoma, and cool ship the wort along the way, and then barrel it there in Oklahoma, and then age it. And and then they do the same thing. Then brew a batch at American Solera, cool ship it while driving it down to Jester King, and then barrel it, age it, everything else, blend and then package there. But this one is probably, when we think about collaborative projects between breweries, this one was 3 years in the making. It is a goose-like blend of 1, 2, and 3 year beer that they did over 3 years of doing this kind of collaborative wort sharing and cool shipping process, in order to finally get to this year where they blended the end result and finally released it. That's insane, from a collaboration process to do this that many times before you actually even release a beer, out commercially. And so the patience involved is incredible with this. And there are plenty of collaborative projects where you see the idea, you read about it, it sounds cool, it's a great, press hook, it's going to get you some likes on Instagram, and that's really fun, and people drink it and then it's gone, and that's that. But this is a project that has produced a beer that was just extraordinary, that that I think, and realistically, we don't often get that out of collaboration beers. Most of the time collaboration beers are opportunities to take risks and try something different. And when you do that, you can come up with some interesting results, but it's usually not world-class results. It is a special thing to then be able, through that blending process, through that aging process, and that selection process, to find a beer through the various barrels of, that have been aged in this project, to then come up with a finished beer that is this extraordinary. Just light, a little bit peppery, lemon lime citrus, woody bread notes, that kind of like bright mimosa sip that carries that kind of fruit character, but does so in a kind of nuanced and layered way with a hefty minerality and a phenolic funk. The acidity on this beer is so well controlled. It's so light and perfectly placed. Obviously, that's a trend that you will see through all of the beers, especially in that kind of wild and sour category. As we tend to enjoy, our judges tend to enjoy, and we intend to enjoy those beers that strike a less intense acidic balance. And this one just absolutely nails it. Anyway, it's a really cool beer, and it was a crazy experiment that they went all in on for year after year after year. And the results have absolutely paid off with Cool Ship Road Trip.
The story on that one is so great. Like, the story isn't enough to make the beer on this list, but the fact that the beer holds up so well, just, after such a cool story is really great.
That's exactly right.
So the next one of our editor's picks, top 20. This one is, these guys talk about a brewery to watch. This is Brick West Get Right Goza out of Spokane, Washington. They've only been around for about a year. And I didn't even realize that because I had been tasting the beers for the magazine, and they're just incredibly sort of mature, accomplished, near perfect lagers, maybe, basically perfect lagers. The Pilsner and Helles came into our blind panel reviews and got in the upper 90s. Then their Imperial Stout did the same thing. And so we were even, some of those beers also, a couple of those beers were also in the discussion, sort of final discussions. But the one that really, with our final rounds of tasting for this issue, really rose to the top was this Goza. So delicate.
I mean, when we get, Pilsner and Helles that came in and scored like a 96 and a 98. And, immediately I'm like, who is this brewery? Where'd they come from? And how on earth? And I looked into it, it was like, they've been open for 6 months, and they sent us, they have gone all in and sent us crowlers of them nonetheless. From a review standpoint, crowlers can be some of the most volatile packaged formats for beers that we review, just because if they're not perfectly purged and, basically perfectly packaged, you can end up with flat beer, oxidized beer much more readily than you can in some of other packaged formats. And these crowlers of Pilsner and Helles just held up so beautifully, for our review panel. So it was like where on earth did these folks come from?
And this Goza, I mean, the word that just keeps popping in my mind with this beer is delicate. It's just so light, and it's very lively, like champagne. Drink it from a tall flute type glass. It just tiptoes right across your palate. The salt is restrained. It's there, but it's very subtle and restrained. The acidity is nicely judged. It's tart. It's very refreshing. It's not sour. It's not rough. It doesn't put a foot wrong in any direction. It's just a lovely, lovely beer. And I've been to Leipzig, and I've drank Goza in Leipzig, and I'm not going to say it tastes like those. This is something else. It's almost on a more technically accomplished level. It's its own thing. Structurally, it's perfect. It's incredibly precise. You could drink so much of this, but it just sparkles in the glass. It's a really, really nice beer. And thank you also to Sam Milne for we got a homebrew recipe for this one too, and he included so many notes with the recipe. We were able to make a whole other brewer's perspective article about their approach to brewing Goza. And if you're interested in brewing that kind of beer, you definitely want to check this out and figure out their approach and see what tricks you might want to borrow from him.
Normally we'll ask brewers, hey, do you want to, we'd love to share a recipe with our readers, and, maybe we'll get, malt percentage and, hops, kind of rough volumes, and we'll scale things around, ask a few questions and try to get it all dialed in. And Sam sent us 1,200 words on how to brew this Goza, which is just insane and incredible. But I think that, and the other recipe that we have in here for Springdale Kolsch is the same kind of thing. I think Jack wrote at least 500 or 600 words on this recipe. And I think what you find, and what we find from that, is you have brewers that care so finely about the process and are so exacting in the way that they accomplish this that they can't tell you how to do it in fewer words. And that speaks volumes about the beers. The fact that these are also very simple beers, and yet the instructions are so in depth in how to achieve and functionally brew these beers, it says a lot about, again, that kind of fine approach to process. Next up on our list, again, seems like we're shifting and we go from one extreme to the other. Next up on our list is another barrel-aged imperial stout, another one that Joe and I have had a few times. And each time that we've tasted it this year, it has reminded us of just how incredible a statement it is. That's a side project, Beer Barrel Time, project out of St. Louis, Missouri, Maplewood, Missouri. Beer Barrel Time is not a very old beer, strangely enough. It's not like Assassin that's been around for 8 or 9 years and has been brewed over that kind of time. It's 3 years old now. It was a project that Corey and the brewers at Side Project came up with to kind of showcase on a regular basis the kind of expression of all of those three things: the base beer recipes, the impact of barrel, and the impact of time. These vintages that are now in the blend of Beer Barrel Time, each year they've been stretching out a little bit more and a little bit more. And so if you look at the first iteration of Beer Barrel Time, which was 2017, generally they were 16, 17, 18 month-ish, kind of aged stouts. At this point, with the 2019 edition, which comes out in the week of Thanksgiving, generally every year. This year, I think the average was 22 months of age in the various components that are in the blend for this. And of course, age alone doesn't make for good barrel-aged imperial stout. It takes more than just time in order to produce that. But I love the way the Side Project has engaged in their barrel age and their big stout program, because I think they've got 8 or 10 recipes of various kinds that are all going into different kinds of barrels. And when they are not single stream beers, when we think about brewing, we think, okay, I'm going to come up with a recipe, I'm going to brew it, I'm going to ferment it, and then I'm going to, package it, or I'm going to further age it in spirits barrels, and then I'm going to release that beer. And that is not the way that they go about this. They think about it in terms of, we put a bunch of these recipes in, we have a vague idea that these might become blending stock for various different kinds of beers that we will release at some point in the future. But those beers go into barrels, they age, and then they start coming up with things, ideas for those beers based on what the barrels are telling them, and they build those blends out of them. This beer is every bit of quality as the best bourbons and the best wines that the world has to offer, and should be considered in the same conversation as those beverages, as this exquisitely crafted, beautifully structured, rich, flavorful, thoughtful thing created by masterful hands. And so that's my philosophical argument for the day. I think I've talked a little bit too long about this, but Side Project Beer Barrel Time is such a phenomenal beer. And as we were trying to think of other barrel-aged beers that we might put in this spot, we just kept coming back to it. Our blind panel rated it 99 this year, and certainly echoes our absolute love for it. Yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Joe.
Yeah, well, it's an exceptional drink, and it almost transcends beer in the way that it's made and produced and the way it presents. I enjoyed a bottle over Thanksgiving weekend last year. The plan was to share it with family who each would have a little taste and be like, oh, that's really great, yeah. But then they're going to move on to other things because they are not going to just hang around and drink Beer Barrel Time all night. So I ended up enjoying the bottle throughout the weekend. I put a cork back in it, and sometimes I'd have it as a naughty little sidecar to a glass of bourbon, or have it with ice cream or pumpkin pie, and it got better all weekend. And it was like it was breathing like a big cab, and it was so fun to enjoy that thing. And I mean, I know you maybe don't feel the way I do about this, but I almost feel guilty about including them because they don't need the attention. Side Project doesn't need the attention. This beer particularly doesn't need the attention. It's very hyped. It's got a high secondary market value, which are things I'd rather not know about. I'll let you know about that stuff, Jamie. But you got to call out, an exceptional drink for what it is. And this is something that's it's a world-class level beverage, and it's just deserves a place on this list for sure.
I think that those factors actually create an additional layer of scrutiny for us as we consider these things. And so, naturally, as from our position, we tend to love to be contrarians just for argument's sake. We'd love to think about all the reasons that we shouldn't do things. And this was one of those beers that we couldn't talk ourselves out of. Like as much as we might have tried to find something, this year, this time, this iteration of the beer, it was such a spectacular experience that it deserves all of these accolades, and we can't take those away just because the rest of the world also knows that. Walk us through the next beer, which again shifts in the other direction, back to Pilsner.
Right. Well, our next editor's pick is one that, it's a surprise and it's not a surprise. So it's not a surprise for us to find the Veil here on this list. What is surprise is that it's a Pilsner.
And to say that, we had, a number of Veil beers that made it to this kind of point in consideration. And in fact, there's, I think, Culminate was another big one from them that, could have just as easily been on this editor's list. There were just some spectacular beers that we've had from the Veil this year. And some weird ones, I'm not going to lie, that Circle of Wolves barley wine with bananas in it was maybe a questionable aesthetic decision, but
it speaks a lot to their seriousness across a range of styles, that they're a brewery much more known for hazy IPAs and ostensibly a lot more focused on mixed fermentation and wild beers, shows up here with a Pilsner because it did really well with our blind tastings, and it's delicious. And then you start to find out a little bit more about how they're brewing it, and they're it's full of Tettnanger and Saaz hops. They're using floor malted barley. It's step mashed. They're using the spunding for natural carbonation. And so there's a seriousness of purpose there, not just for their, trendy stuff and wild stuff, but also for the lager. And Jamie, we've had plenty of lagers from breweries better known for hazy IPAs, and we don't need to mention any of those beers, most of them are not that good. But this was a really delicious
Most of them
Pilsner.
are fine. They are fine, but they don't necessarily rise to this level of celebration where they are beers that we want to, kind of put the full weight of our editorial support behind, that we feel are making some statement that needs to be recognized. And this beer does, it absolutely does. There was, and it was interesting, I think, as we were getting into through our best in beer tasting through some of these Pilsners, how our three finalists in that realm were so different from each other. And yet we're all, different within a relative range, of course, because they're all still Pilsners, but definitely had different aesthetic approaches. I found that, the Veil vein here, I wouldn't call it like a rustic approach, but there was just a touch of like toothiness to it that kind of set it apart. It still had all of those beautiful, noble characteristics, but there was just this kind of grit in the, in the malt character that made it feel special and made it, just made it interesting. Every step of it was just this beer that was interesting and also just beautifully drinkable at the same time.
It was, I love noble hops, but I want to smell them and I want to taste them. And this just had that aroma cranked up just a half notch. So you're really getting your nose in that like lime zest herbal thing. And then there was enough malt to back it all up. It was really nicely done.
So kudos to the Veil, who have shown that they can not only brew the craziest dessert styles that anyone might want to experiment with, and fruit slushy sour beers or imperial stouts aged on Oreos or God knows what else. They can do all of those, and they do all of those just fine, and in fact do them incredibly well. And some of our critics have mentioned their beers in their individual critics lists. We'll get to that in the next episode of the podcast. but yeah, to pull this Pilsner out into the best beers of the year, it said something. But kudos to Matt Tarpey, head brewer for the Vale, and their whole brewing team for creating this wonderful marvel of a beer. Next up, I'm going to talk about Untitled Art's Cherry Sour a la Mode, which was a weird one. As we go through this, we also try not to be style purists. We love classic lagers. We love classic Belgian beers. But I think that the zeitgeist matters, that the current trends matter, that beers are not wrong just because they don't fit into some historical model of what people have done before. Having said that, it's always an interesting challenge to find what we might consider a best example of some of these progressive styles, and then defining a logic and a reasoning behind that kind of, that creating a rubric by which we can judge a best. We definitely took a principled approach to celebrating Untitled Art's Cherry Sour a la Mode, which was a fantastically delicious beer, incredibly sweet, over the top sweet, but also layered in flavor with everything from deep tart cherry kind of, and pie seasoning cherry flavor to a tight little crusty breadiness, that was also super present in this, that nice hint of touch of vanilla, making everything kind of pop. I mean, and then of course, this gorgeous pink body and bright pink foam that when you pour it in a glass, it just looks crazy and fun and exciting and visibly enticing. And so, in this regard, it was such an interesting accomplishment in this kind of realm to do it in a way that we can, we find technically sound, but is also incredibly compelling. You really dug this one too, right, Joe?
It was delicious, man. I mean, it's an absurd.
And
beer.
You are a purist. You are
totally.
You wrote Around Belgium in 80 beers and another guide to Belgian beer. I mean, it doesn't get more traditionalist.
Yeah, but I'm also a beer judge, and if I was in a judging specialty beers and they put this thing in front of me and they said, this is a cherry pie beer a la mode, and that's exactly what it tastes like. It's note perfect for that. It tastes like a sour cherry pie. You can smell the crust. The ice cream element is there, subtle, but it's there. And you said it's really sweet. I mean, it's sweet, but I think it's actually really balanced. I mean, it's I don't know if you could sit and drink pint after pint of it, but that's not the point of this at all. This is you could have this for dessert. You could have it even as a aperitif before a meal, and it's delicious. It's fun.
Really,
it's
fun. It's really sweet. But that sweetness is a selling point for the kinds of folks that like to drink these beers. And so I don't take that away from them. There is a time and a place for it. And I mean, even I enjoyed every single time we drank it. And I did drink this beer 4 times, I think, through the whole process, because it was just so interesting. And I kept wanting to go back to that experience and try it again, just because it was so compelling like that. And I kept wanting to figure it out. And so, kudos to Untitled Art on this one. It's a very cool beer, and it's excellent proof that you can be progressive in your approach to style, do it in a technically sound way, and do it in a way that meets expectations for consumers without, causing some negative stuff to happen in the meantime. So, there you go.
Yeah.
Joe, walk us through another Pacific Northwest IPA on our editor's list.
Yeah. Well, is it an IPA? That's a fun question. It calls itself an IPA, and I'm going to take their word for it. It's Wayfinder Relapse. And this is the beer that convinced me that India Pale Lager was ahead of its time. And maybe due for a comeback as well. If some of the IPLs, when
maybe
IPL
due for a rename.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know.
It?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think we have to. Maybe we can make them better than they used to be. Because what I remember
IPL is a terrible name.
IPL
is a terrible name.
It's true. It doesn't make sense historically or anything. But a lot of the ones I remember were pretty brusque, kind of sometimes roughly bittered. A lot of times, a lot of body to them. And the only really the only difference between some of those and IPAs was the yeast and the fermentation. Whereas here we're taking things arguably a step farther in the lager direction in terms of crispness and lightness of body appearance. It's a very pale gold color. They're like a classic American lager. They're using quite a bit of rice flakes in there to get that paleness and that crispness out of it. They call it a cold IPA. It's hopped like an IPA, but they're using, Weihenstephaner lager yeast. They're lagering it like a lager. And it doesn't really matter what it is or how they do it. It's delicious. It's 7% alcohol, but which at its drinkability level makes it pretty dangerous, because it's very easy to drink. It's nicely balanced. In the hop character, it's definitely got that Northwest dankness, piney dankness to it, a bit even catty. But then there is also that grapefruit rind in there too to keep it interesting. But it never feels rough. The resin doesn't stick to your tongue and prevent you from drinking more of it. It's one that we were drinking, late one night and just kept talking about it and working it out in our minds and got excited about it. The other thing they call it, besides cold IPA, they say it's Wester than West Coast, and that's a good way to make sense of it. If think about a West Coast IPA and what makes a West Coast IPA West Coast, they've just gone that much farther by treating it like a lager and
They've
lightening up that body. It's a fun beer to drink. I mean, Wayfinder is doing great lagers. There's their Czech as fuck. There's a Czech AF is how they bill it. The Helles is wonderful. They're really nice. If you go there, it's to Portland, and that's something I was supposed to do this year. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. But they got the side poles, and so they know what they're doing with the lagers. We could have put a lager in the slot, but this beer is so interesting and intriguing and delicious and it's just fun to talk about, and it's even more fun to drink it. Great beer. Congratulations to Kevin Davey at Wayfinder. This is a wonderful beer.
Let's talk about another IPA after that, and that is another one of our 100 rated beers. This one is the second year in a row that New Anthem out of Wilmington, North Carolina, has shown up on our editor's picks for top 20 beers, or for the top beers of the year. Clapback is the beer this year, and it is on this list because it also scored a perfect 100 with our blind panel. We don't generally love to run breweries back to back, in any given year after year on this. Certainly, it's a broad world of breweries out there with 8,000 plus in the U.S. and 20 some odd thousand around the world. Our job as editors of Craft Beer Brewing Magazine is to find the best and also kind of create that, cover in a representative way, but also dig and move past the easier, more comfortable things and find those brewers that are doing the most interesting work around the world. And so, again, we don't love to put people on this list year after year, but like I said, we had, I think, 5 perfect 100 rated beers this year, and you can't ignore that when our panel rates beers at that kind of level. And so we couldn't deny New Anthem on this at all. Clapback in it, itself is, I think, a perfect expression of Citra hop. Like, this is a double IPA, 8%, that is everything that we love about the Citra hop. And I mean that with all of the components of Citra, because it is heavy on that orange juiciness. It is, but it also carries a certain amount of light, pithy bitterness to it. It has a little bit of a grassy and herbal character, tightly tucked in there. And so as you taste this beer, it is not just, it's a juice bomb. Sure, you could look at it that way, and if your palate is in that place, you can enjoy it as such. More power to you. But as we taste it, we taste this kind of multi-layered, nuanced thing that really just tastes like all of those elements of the hop. And it becomes fascinating from that perspective. It is immediately pleasurable just on that slightly sweet, fruit juicy kind of level, but this kind of depth of tropical character with grapefruit, tangerine, lychee, lime, orange, with those kinds of herbal undertones makes it something that is more deep. It is perfect construction in there that's interesting as well as being accessible. I love that kind of thing. I love beers that work on those kinds of levels. I love something that we can enjoy from a critical perspective, but your average fan that may not need to get into that kind of depth on it can just be like, dude, I love this. It tastes so awesome. It's a juice bomb. Both of those are valid means of appreciation and enjoyment. I'm not going to judge. We all have different ways and reasons for enjoying what we do, and this one works on a couple of those different levels. And so kudos to New Anthem, second year in a row on our best beers of the year list.
Yeah, so next on our list is one that I think we both knew after we drank it back in February that it may end up here. We were at the Side Project Invitational. There was a slushy machine at work, and that's not a crazy sight to see at beer festivals anymore. Remember beer festivals? Anyways, so for me,
I remember.
I was highly skeptical, and it was from Omnipollo. The full name of the beer: Bianca Blueberry Maple Chocolate Peanut Butter Pancake Lassi Goza. And I'm not gonna lie. I wanted to hate it. I wanted to. I saw it. I was like, this is ridiculous. This shouldn't be a thing. It's going to be terrible. But it looked amazing. These little, these glasses, this dark black liquid and this like almost glowing violet colored soft serve stuff on top. And it's like you have to go and take a picture of it. You have to. And that's the game. So you go and you get one and you take a picture of it and you taste it. You're like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good. That's really good. It's delicious. I mean, they got the sour beer part, the blueberry business up top to the blueberry goes. I don't know. I'm not sure how all the parts fit together exactly, really, but it is juicy and tart and refreshing actually. And then you get into that underneath part there with the maple and the chocolateness and it's naughty. It was fun. It tasted really good, but as a phenomenon, it's fascinating in itself as a piece of theater. It's almost a ceremony, And it's not like going to your college bar in Columbia, Missouri. It was tropical liqueurs. Maybe there's one of those in your town where you're picking out your frozen margarita, or whatever. This is something where the flavors are actually very considered, even if they are kind of jamming it together and see if it works. And it totally worked. I think it's up there with thinking about the Untitled Art cherry pie a la mode, the sour cherry a la mode. It's fun, and it just dares you to hate fun. And I don't hate fun. I like fun. This beer is delicious. It was cool. I took pictures of it, put it on the Twitters.
Yeah,
and we've had you've had plenty of these probably way more than I have, these slushy beers, and I'm probably often they're a bit disappointing, but this was fun. Go ahead.
So what I like about this is that what you mentioned about the drama is right. As we wrote in the description about this, it feels a little bit more Jose Andres than TGI Fridays. There is fun, there's obvious fun, and then there is fun with a purpose. And I think that there is a fun with a purpose behind this that I find so interesting, where it asks you to explore and parse out things like texture and temperature and the interaction between textures. It's a layered pour where it's beer on the bottom and then this smoothie frozen pour above it, and it's not just a pour of slushy beer. It's very distinctly poured in two layers in order to kind of achieve this. But it also, when you look at the kind of molecular gastronomy approach of fine chefs, there was the same kind of approach to theater, but there's also this element of wonder and merriment to it. And they don't deny that. When you go spend $400 a plate to go eat at a restaurant with Wiley Dufresne or Blackbird in Chicago, there is this kind of theatrical fun element to it of an entertainment, and I think that is a viable creative avenue. Brewers have they've begun to explore that. I think Omnipolo is one of the best at doing that in a way that is simultaneously fun, pleasurable, but also thoughtful and engaging, and not just, hey, let's put some beer in a smoothie machine and pour smoothies out of it. There's something else to it there that I find really interesting, and so kudos to them for that, because that was a really fun beer. I drank it also. It was a wonderful palate cleanser amongst all of those heavy, big imperial stouts at the Side Project Invitational. And what a phenomenal experience. What a phenomenal event, and a beautiful beer from a fantastic brewery. Up next, let's talk about Reuben's Brews 3 Rise Men. This was a 99 with our blind panel this year, and that's what pushed it out here. We loved just the intensity and intentionality of it. I think the blind panel themselves loved that it was sweet, but not too sweet. I think that there are current cloying trends happening in everything from imperial stout to barrel-aged imperial barley wine that, that kind of shift things off into just a like stand out in the middle of the bottle share kind of direction. And 3 Rise Men was a beer that we can enjoy drinking by ourselves or in a small group, drinking by the glass, even though it is a hefty beer. And it wasn't just one of those, let's crush it with Play-Dohs. It was a tightly structured kind of mashup of Cadbury Fruit and Nut bar with a Cadbury Caramello bar. A little bit of that, that kind of, fruity, dark fruit ester fermentation, cranberry, raspberry, currant kind of approach. And then also just these nice midtones of toffee and caramel that made for so much fun. And then, this kind of vanilla coconut barrel note just pulled it all together. Delicious beer, but still had a little bit of an herbal spice to it that kind of helped clean it out with and keep it from finishing with that kind of sweetness, despite the kind of sweetness that it had. And so I think that that this kind of capacity within barley wine to be delicious beers that don't have to be incredibly sweet sugar bombs, it's a positive thing, and we need to celebrate those. And certainly our blind panel agreed with that one, and rating that one a 99.
Yeah, the next one is another one of those breweries where they had a few beers that were kind of in the late conversations, and this was the one of them that just sort of blew many others away. It's Wolf's Ridge Double Chocolate Rum Barrel Direwolf. And it is one for the real dark chocolate lovers. It's got this rich cocoa character to it on so many levels. It's like there's a bit of roast nuts in the nose. It's full bottled and kind of full bodied and kind of fluffy feeling on the palate. But you can't escape the dark chocolate with this one, no matter where you go. It's like the powder that goes on the truffles in a nice chocolate shop, and I can even imagine the chocolatier, like a Belgian chocolatier, explaining how he went all the way to Guatemala to get this one type of cacao that he has to have to make this thing. It's like it's so nice. It tastes like real chocolate, not like thick chocolate milk. It's got a lot of layers to that, and it was fun to drink. It's really balanced. The roast is there. There's just enough bitterness there. It's not one of these cloying chocolate syrup beers. It's because of that, it's much easier to drink than it ought to be for its strength. So it's a wonderful beer, highly accomplished in technique and product, and it's just a fun beer to drink. And it did really, really well with our tastings.
Yeah, and we had so many interesting good beers from Wolf's Ridge this year, from their Daybreak kind of coffee cream ale to the Terre Sauvage, and I think it was the St. Francis, the barrel-aged Belgian dark. Just really some standout beers across the board, and that's certainly something we take into consideration as we are thinking about the kind of oeuvre or body of work from a brewery over a given year, or even recent history. It is fun when we see somebody firing on all cylinders that can produce really delicious beers across all of those styles. Makes it even more exciting to be able to celebrate them and call them out for one of these beers in our top 20 of the year.
That coffee cream ale was really nice too. Daybreak. I mean, that's that smell when you walk into a coffee shop where they're also doing some roasting, and you get that just really fresh coffee nose. That's what, when you put your nose over this blonde cream ale, that's what you got. It was really cool. Great job, guys. Congratulations to Wolf's Ridge.
Next up is a beer that Joe and I both loved, Von Ebert's Alma. It's a mixed fermentation beer. I guess you'd call it a Brett culture foeder-aged farmhouse ale, aged on 1,000 pounds of peaches. You know, fruit beers are not typically our primary jam, but every time I say something like that, I just find myself loving all these beers and having to walk it all back. You know, we've had some other really interesting beers in this kind of lightly fruited, low, very light acidity, very delicate acidity kind of realm. But Alma just stood out. Even as we were going through this best in beer tasting, I do all our pre-tasting. I might taste 40 or 50 beers, in a day. And, in that kind of scenario, it is easy for things to kind of fall by the wayside. But there are beers like this that I can recall the experience, particularly because it just stopped. I just stopped. You taste this beer amidst all of these other beers, and it just floored me. It just stopped in my tracks and took a breath. I need to slow my pace down here and just sit on this for 10 or 15 minutes and contemplate it, because it was a simple beer. It wasn't a beer that just brought a shitload of flavor and tons of fruit flavor to just jump out of this kind of complex lineup. It was an incredibly subtle beer, just a finely pointed beer. It was muted and soft and, furtive and quiet, and didn't need to try to be more than it was. But it was so finely tuned and so beautifully structured. That peach flavor was there, but it was so tightly, it wasn't overly sweet. It was nicely dried out. It was still present. Every piece of it was just at this kind of perfect level to make for an enjoyable but small and thoughtful experience. And so that's what I loved about this beer. How did it strike you, Joe?
I love the way that the fruit balanced against the funk in this one, and that's really hard to do. But you had there was quite a lot of fruit in there. I mean, they used 1,000 pounds of peaches in in a foeder, or there's foeders and peaches involved somewhere along the line. I'm not sure all the order of everything, but the fruit is there. I mean, it tastes like peaches, and it presented to me more almost like dried apricots too, with that tartness to them. There's citrus peel in there coming from the Brett partly and from the acidity of the beer, but then there's that rustic barn and cellar floor aspect to it too that grounds the whole thing. And it was fun and serious at the same time in equal measure, and really balanced. It wasn't too much in any direction. It was just a really lovely beer, nicely done.
Yeah. And that brings us to our last and final beer, beer of our top 20 editors picks for 2020. And this one is a jointly awarded trophy for two projects that we both felt were important to highlight this year. They seemed to speak to the moment that is All Together and Black is Beautiful. Both of these projects have been brewed by, close to 1,000 breweries or more than 1,000 breweries. Each, they were large scale collaborative projects brewed by so many different breweries, but all built around causes. Deep respect to Sierra Nevada for kind of spearheading this back in 2018 with the Resilience Project of putting a recipe out there and getting breweries to make their own iterations in order to, to support a social good. And, in the case of Resilience, it was the Butte County fire. I think it was the Camp Fire right out in California, which, was a huge fire at the time, which has now been engulfed by this current fire that is so much larger and impactful. but it was a great cause and a great idea to rally brewers around it. And all together did the same. I guess it was May, or late April, early May, bringing brewers together around the cause of supporting the plight of hospitality workers, of bringing more visibility and notoriety to the kind of plight that hospitality workers were facing through these COVID shutdowns. Unfortunately, obviously, none of us want to be dealing with this, but it is a condition of living in the world today and trying to keep people safe and healthy and avoiding the kind of deaths and medical complications that seem to be coming in droves with COVID. And so in order to do that, we've had to make sacrifices in our economy, and sacrifices, those sacrifices have been most poignantly felt by those in the hospitality sector, because that those businesses are so impacted by physical presence. And so smart thing that that Other Half Brewing pulled together with the All Together project. And then not that long after that, in mid to late May, after the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, and we started seeing this cultural awakening happening around issues of race again in the United States, and folks questioning this kind of approach to systemic racism and the impact that racism has in our society. Marcus Baskerville and Weathered Souls Brewing down in San Antonio launched the Black is Beautiful project, similar to All Together, in that it aimed to have breweries around the world brew beers and then contribute the profits made from those beers to local charities that are all aligned around the mission. It's a beautiful project. I think over 1,100 breweries signed on to Black and Beautiful and brewed Black and Beautiful beers so far. I'm actually drinking Alvarado Street's edition of Black is Beautiful right now, and it's a fantastic iteration. But I love, in a broader sense, and I should say that we fully support this idea of using craft beer as a force for cultural good and societal good. To see so many breweries jump in and brew beers around these causes and do them in a collaborative way, and to also kind of harness what are typically seen as some of the weirder, more base aspects of beer trading, this kind of completionist, or I want to tick as many of them as I can kind of elements to beer trading. These collaborations found both of those. And so you all of a sudden started watching beer traders out there in the market trading for more iterations of All Together beers, more iterations of Black is Beautiful beers. And rather than just trying to check the top beers on Untapped off of their lists, they were collecting these beers, drinking these beers, sharing these beers with their friends. And the end result ultimately is more funds and more visibility for important social causes. And so I think to that end, both of these beers are well deserving of a place in our top 20 beers of 2020, and are fantastic projects. So kudos to Marcus and the Weathered Souls crew, and kudos to the Other Half crew as well for having the foresight to pull their friends together and build these kinds of projects that allow breweries to do their work together. I think that brings us to a close for our top 20 beers of 2020, Joe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Let's pivot and talk quickly about homebrew brands. Why don't you talk us through our homebrew brands here, Joe?
All right. So homebrew brands of the year. You homebrewers out there, told us your favorite brands of homebrew equipment, gear. Here we go. Number 15 is Stout. Number 14 was Pico Brew. 13 is Craft Brew, Catalyst. Number 12, Brew Jacket. 11, Fast Ferment. Number 10, Braumeister. Number 9, Bayou. At number 8, we've got Tilt. Number 7, Anvil. Number 6, The Grain Father. Number 5, More Beer. 4 is Spike. Number 3 is Inkbird. Number 2 is Blickman. And at number 1, again this year, we've got SS Brewtech for our favorite Reader's Choice homebrew brands of the year.
Congratulations to all of them. If on the top of brew gear of the year, number 20, the Spike Solo System. Number 19, Inkbird Temperature Controller. Number 18, the Blickman Hellfire Burner. Number 17 is the Spike Brewing Kettle. Number 16, the Catalyst Fermenter. Number 15, the Anvil Stainless Bucket Fermenter. Number 14, SS Brewtech Infusion Mash Tun. Number 13, Spike Brewing Flex Fermenter. Number 12, the Kegland Brewzilla. Number 11, Blickman's Riptide Pump. Number 10, SS Brewtech's Unitank. Number 9, the SS Brewtech Kettle. Number 8, Brewer's Edge Mash and Boil. Number 7, Robo Brew. Number 6, Spike Brewing's Conical Unitank. Number 5, the Anvil Foundry System. Number 4, a Tilt Hydrometer. Number 3, SS Brewtech Chronicle Fermenter, same as it was last year. Number 2, also the same as it was last year, the SS Brewtech Brew Bucket. And once again, in the number 1 spot, the Grainfather Connect. It's time for us to go. Before we do, nearly 2,000 breweries across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico partner with G&D Chillers. Raw North Star Pils is a new base malt to set your compass by. Inquire about a free craft brew sample pack from 5 Star Chemicals and Supply. Grandstand is your one-stop shop for drinkware, apparel, and promotional items. ABS Commercial is giving away a Keg Viking keg washer live on December 5th. And subscribe now to Craft Beer and Brewing to get full access to this year's Best in Beer issue right now. And I do mean right now. If you haven't subscribed to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, why have you not done that yet? You've gotten this far. Hit that subscribe button and just do it and be able to read all of our thoughts on the best beers of the year and all of our readers' thoughts as well. Joe, we're going to be back next week, and next week's episode of the podcast, we're going to go drill through. We're going to have some special guests on the podcast. All of our critics from Stan Hieronymus, Kate Bernat, you, me, Samir Kadari, and we are going to talk through. Maybe we might even have some professional brewer guests, on the episode to talk about some of their best beers of the year. We're going to see how that all plays out. Should be a fun episode. I encourage everyone to tune in and hear how our critics things lined up for them this year. In the meantime, cheers, and we will see you next week.
Thank y'all. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.